Actually, when we got in there, I was like, oh, that's eerily familiar because training's going to be important.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. I'm gonna go into one last conversation here for what we got going on, and that's basically this is from SUAS News, and this is just recent, July 9th, and it's CAE and Volcopter partner to create the global air taxi pilot workforce of tomorrow. Now, let me take a drink after
Yep.
that because that's a lot to be said, but there is a lot going on here,
Yeah.
right? There's so much going on. Is that we've talked recently about the urban air mobility that's going to basically be facing the challenges of the air taxi market, the growth, and everything else that's going to happen. But on top of that, you're going to need some sort of pilot workforce to fulfill those seats. If not, if they're not going to be fully automated, you're going to need ground operators or some stopgap person that's going to occupy the seat
Hmm.
until the pilots are actually ready to actually get out of the aircraft, right? Because it's
Yep.
still an aircraft. Now, the best part about this entire thing is that CAE has an amazing track record, okay, of producing some of the best simulators, some of the best uh, pilot development programs. They're a global leader in aviation. These guys are serious, okay? There is nothing not serious about this proposal. And the fact that they're looking to attack it with up to, and this is where the report comes in and says the CAE commits to expanding its internal training network to support Volocopter's growth and global pilot training with a forecasted investment of $40 million. Right now, there's a couple other things that are caveats here, though. All right. And part of these training programs, they say that they produced this white paper, and the white paper in and of itself is quite embedded with big ideas. But the problem is that it's only 15 pages long. And when you look at the caveats that are here, they're talking about something that I really want to get into very quickly here. Okay. And that
Yep.
is this part right here. They're basically talking about the fact that they're looking at commencing these operations by 2023, 2025. And they're saying that the global aviation industry has struggled to recruit and train enough experienced pilots to fill the cockpits of airlines and the business aviation and helicopter operators. And there's a growing
Yep.
industry realization that development of eVTOL aircraft and launch of AAM operations will further increase demand for professional pilots. Okay, I'm going to stop right there for a minute, okay?
Hmm.
Because I don't know if that took COVID into effect because they also laid off a ton of pilots in the last year and a half as well, right? So,
Yep.
which makes people shaky about staying in that workforce environment, so on and so forth. But what's your take on so far what you're seeing here with the CAE? Because you and I have both got a lot of experience of with this type of pilot training, and what's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, CAE is definitely got some pedigree and assets that they can use to that they would be able to do this effectively if this is what they want to do. Again, it's really kind of thinking about what, when you ask about this, I'm also thinking to myself, okay, again, where's the FAA come into this? What kind of level of certification is going to be required to fly such a vehicle? And we've kind of mentioned some of this before. Brainstorm, we said, okay, if it's straight VTOLs, then you're probably thinking helicopter
Mm-hmm.
pilots. But again, there's many different designs of VTOLs. Some VTOLs are really kind of designed closer to like a helicopter replacement. So
Right.
maybe that would be more helicopter kind of flying. But then there's many VTOLs that are again vertical takeoff and land. But then the cruise part is very very more similar to planes. And some of these, depending what they are, they might fly even much higher than the average helicopter would fly. They have different. They're used for different things. So really, a hybrid between helicopters and
Sure.
airplanes. So I do wonder, um, where actually, really what an FA person would say about this. Like somebody in standards, flight standards district's office or something would say really about this particular report here, and what they think.
Mm-hmm.
What are they? Somebody somewhere, and I say that, and maybe I'm wrong, but somebody somewhere in the FA must be thinking about the exact same question.
Sure.
This is a market that is emerging. It's going to be something that happens in whatever form we do see. And just like you mentioned, also, Mike, there's going to be, and I think I've talked, even if the vehicles are going to be totally automated,
Mm-hmm.
take off to land, there's going to be stopgap pilots somewhere in the chain.
Sure.
Whether those pilots are going to be on board for a while, or they're going to be in that backup center we talked about with some of the other players. Like most recently, EHang is going to have a room of pilots wherever that they sit, and they're going to have the ability to take over. There are obviously going to be many players that are going to have the same kind of idea.
Yeah.
So
That's a good talking point though. So
Will there be pilots needed for this? Yes. Uh, I just wonder what they while Volocopter and CAE partner, and this is the great like maybe first step thinking
mhm.
about it.
well,
What does the rest of it look like?
let me
You know,
interrupt you there for a
so
second because here's the thing, right? You're right. There's going to be a need for you're looking at pilot hybrids for the future, right? You don't know if these guys are going to be seated in the aircraft at first. And let's take a look right now at the velocity or what they call the vol this is what they're sharing as
the
the
Volocopter.
Volocopter itself and what they call the
Yeah.
Volocity, right? This is their main design.
Oh yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, let's face it, it's pretty rudimentarily just an overexpanded drone. I know some people like that idea, some people don't. If you disagree with
Mhm.
us, that's great because it's just the way we see it. There's not much innovation in the design except for taking multiple motors and replacing the rotor disc of what was ordinarily a helicopter. Okay, fine. All right. So they're calling this an extraordinarily safe design. And what I'm wondering though is how much maneuverability and how much pilot training is going to be needed because right now this looks to be a one-on-one vehicle, right? There's not much room, let
Yeah.
alone for passenger, let alone pilot. So,
Right.
if it's air mobility for one, that's an expensive solution. If it's air mobility for two, you're going to dilute the price over how many pilots for monitoring how many systems and how long are they going to be able to
Of
fly?
course.
What are their operational hours going to be? What kind of airman class are they going to be? Lots of things to be
Yeah.
decided here, right?
What kind of currency are they going to have? They're sitting at a desk watching 10 flights at a time that they never
Right.
fly.
How much time do they how
I
much
mean,
time do they have to spend in sims? What's their IMC
I don't
requirements?
know.
So
I don't know.
lots of
I
things
don't
and
know.
this one kind of gets me
I don't know.
to the second part of the conversation. You and I both have a lot of experience developing curriculums for the people that have to be flying these especially helicopters,
Yes.
okay?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So Corey was chief pilot, I was training captain. One of my things in training standards was to actually write the physical standards of which we actually would train pilots to. Okay. And
Hmm.
so the interesting part here is I'm kind of curious as how you're going to get to measure a standard from top to bottom, like you said, because you don't really have a syllabus. You don't really have the
Hmm.
input controls and you don't have any unification of any processes yet. So it's going to be kind of
Hmm.
difficult to kind of spoon feed that information into this group of pilots by 2023 when the standard hasn't been created yet.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and to kind of maybe shed a little more light on people who may not know what Mike talks about when the curriculum. So if you haven't been a pilot, I can give you a little bit of rundown, kind of how things kind of go, really, really quickly. Mike and I worked at a school that did Part 61 training, but also Part
Hmm.
141. And what that means, in a nutshell, the 141 training is under different regulation, where the whole course itself is more stringent and it's very much laid out in what you do, what lesson, what things you do in that
Hmm.
lesson, how you pass that lesson, and then how you pass the stage and then the whole course. So it's all laid out. It's Part 61 is more like you would know a guy who's a pilot. He's also got a CFI certificate, so he can teach you legally. He takes you up and you fly with him doing things for 6 months, and then eventually you know everything, and he sends you for a check
Correct.
ride, and you're done. That's Part 61.
One's very
So
stringent,
Part
one's fairly
141
lenient.
generally, yeah, Part 141 is generally, definitely seen as a better program because it
Rigorous.
has, as Mike's kind of alluded to, better
Hmm.
standards, and you kind of know what you're getting, and the FAA knows what you're
Right.
getting. So the FAA people that are in that area, that monitor that school, they also can approve or disapprove that program, and they can put their input in, and then once it's approved, they know it's a good
Right.
program.
And but the other
Going
problem
through
is
all that,
the other problem is we also did it to a different standard for EASA, which is the European standard, which
yeah,
is
yeah,
actually takes it to a whole nother level because that's many hours of ground schooling, many hours of examinations. The entire exam process is different, and it's to a much more stringent standard. So, and we had
yep,
those trainees there as well, and Corey and I were both first in them because we trained them. We had our EASA instructor
yep,
certificates. So,
yep,
that's a
yep,
whole nother standard. But I wanted to interrupt there because it
yeah.
gets higher. There are higher qualifications.
Of course, and just alluding or expanding a bit on what Mike's talking about, there's other material that whether you're training or aviation administration, safety administration, or the FAA, there's when a school like a chief like myself would go with standards like Mike, and we would look at something and we would design the actual course itself, what the material looks like.
Hmm.
We draw from different places, whether it's previous experience or a report from somewhere else about safety or something about this thing over here, or maybe it's actually the guidance from the FAA itself,
Mhm.
which is now called the ACS.
The ACS,
It used to be called PTS. Basically, it's just a document that very explicitly lays out what a applicant would need to meet the standard for whatever license you're talking about, or certificate you're talking about. And we can use that as kind of the skeleton, the framework, to have a basic idea of how the course looks, and then we could go best practice, whatever we're talking about, best practice, kind of fill in the gaps and make
right.
it a better program. I guess
They've
as
got
I
their
kind
work
of
cut out
ramble
for
on here
them.
a bit, and Mike's got his input too. What we're kind of getting at
It's a
is
big deal.
there's a lot going on there, and this is a new thing. And just as we kind of really quickly said in the beginning, what does this fall? What even category is this aircraft going to be?
Mhm.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
So this is a huge conversation, and we're really only just barely scratching the surface with you guys, just from our experience and some of these documents. So it's going to be something we can talk about many more times if that's what you guys want to talk about. But yeah, it's a big deal that CA is getting in here, but what it's going to look like is
It could be. So here's the thing: when you jump in 2 feet first, and unless you have a standard that you can apply, look, it's easy. We understand what the role for pilot should be, and I think that's where Corey was kind of giving that explanation of, is that we're not making new pilots, but we're doing is we're making a new aircraft, but we're making an aircraft with a
yeah,
very, very defined, specific set of rules that might not ever go, say, cross country. This thing might not ever go 25 nautical miles. It might not ever,
it might.
it might not ever stray into some of these other categorical rules that have always existed. And for that, where
Mhm.
are they going to fit this in and how are they going to develop that curriculum? It's going to take a while to
Yeah,
work
where
this
some
out.
of these Yeah, where some of these air taxis legit say they're going to go 35 miles
Yeah,
maximum range. Another one say 200 miles at 200 miles per hour or
that's a
more.
performance vehicle.
That's a
Yeah.
huge range
Yeah.
to say, oh, you're an air taxi pilot. Cool, you can fly the EHang 216. Great. Oh, you're an air taxi pilot. Oh, go ahead and fly the Hyundai motor one they got down here on page
Or the
12.
or the
If you
Jet
go down
Upterra
there on the
J2000, because that's going to be a,
or the Jet
yeah,
Aptera, which is going to go 200 miles per
yeah.
hour and 200. So
It's going to be
they're
different.
not the same. Yeah, so I'm not sure. Yeah, it's
It's going to
interesting.
be real interesting how they
Yeah.
get the standard together. Hey, if you guys like this conversation, do us a favor. Go ahead, like, subscribe, and join the conversation with us. We could have gotten this one right. We could have gotten it wrong, but we want to hear from you guys below about what you think the future of the air taxi market looks like. And on top of that, where the
Mhm.
money is going to be spent to train the next level and next generation pilots in the air taxi market. Because that's another
Mhm.
place to follow some of the money that will be invested in the not too distant future. So we'll wrap that.
Yep.